If you grew up near the Appalachian Mountains, you already know. Folks don't just make up stories out here, they remember them. I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. It's wild how many of us are sitting in the dark, listening to the same story, scattered across different corners of the country. Hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more people find their way into these woods, whether they should or not. Let's start. I don't tell this story at conferences anymore. The first time I did, some guy in the back laughed and asked if I'd been sampling the radon leaks. The truth is, I don't care who believes it, but I think someone should know. Back in 2011, I took a short-term contract in Bluff County, Kentucky, up near a forested rise known locally as Broken Pine Ridge. It's barely mentioned on geological surveys. Locals call it a ridge, but it's really the eastern face of a collapsed karst formation. Limestone riddled with sinkholes, abandoned gas wells, and half-mapped caverns. I wasn't there for treasure or ghosts. I was there for numbers. A defunct coal operation, Dalverson and Sons, had plans to offload a patch of land to a utility company. My job was to assess the terrain's long-term stability, check old tunnels, inspect fissures, run subsurface resonance readings. Boring, low-level hazard mitigation. They paired me with two younger surveyors out of Lexington. Sean, a non-stop talker who couldn't sit still, and Marcus, the kind of guy who made eye contact once per week max. Both smart, both capable, but not mountain folk, and that made them careless. We camped near a long-abandoned shaft called Hollow Number 5. No gate, no posted warning. Just a busted chain-link fence and a sunken pit veiled in fern. The mine had been inactive since the 70s, but that's the sort of language that means nobody wanted to be legally responsible for what was left behind. On day 3, Marcus spotted a sinkhole that wasn't on our map. About 30 yards off trail, buried under brush. A shallow depression in the earth, just deep enough to make you curious. Sean, of course, said, "Maybe we'll find bootlegger bones." I said we'd mark it and move on. We didn't. When Marcus pulled the brush aside, the ground beneath him gave way. Just a foot, not a fall, but enough to feel a hollow chamber below. The hole opened into a vertical shaft about 40 feet deep, ribbed with iron anchors and slick with condensation. Too clean to be natural, too narrow for machinery. We debated calling it in, but I made the dumb call to descend. It wasn't on any official layout. That made it interesting. Dangerous, yes, but interesting. I clipped into a harness and lowered myself in with a helmet cam and handheld floodlight. The shaft curved slightly halfway down. My boots touched gravel, fine crushed slate and bits of wire mesh. I swept the light around. Old bricks, a corroded pipe, some ancient piece of rebar bent into a question mark. Nothing screamed death trap, so I called up that I was moving in further. About 20 feet ahead, the passage widened into a low, horizontal chamber. The air grew immediately colder. Moist. Not cave cold. Morgue cold. That's when the light hit the first wall. It was covered in runes. Not language. Just etched symbols, long vertical slashes, spirals, odd geometric shapes stacked like equations without answers. The pattern repeated over and over again, like it had been carved by someone with a compulsion. No soot, no graffiti, just old, black scoring, burned in, and below that scratches, not markings, nail tracks, hundreds of them, as if something had tried to claw its way out, not in. Then the smell hit me, not rot, not mold, blood and copper, thick enough to taste. I turned to call up to Marcus, and that's when I saw something move at the edge of the light, a shape, just beyond the reach of the beam. A slumped figure, pale, narrow, not moving. I froze. No sound. No breath. But it shifted again. I backed away. My boot clipped a rusted pipe, and the clang echoed like a shotgun blast. That's when the wall exhaled. The chamber filled with a low groan, deep, like granite flexing under stress. The light above flickered. My radio went to static. Then I heard my own voice echo back at me. "Don't go." I hadn't said anything, but the voice was mine. Same inflection. same rhythm, but slowed. Don't. Go. I turned, sprinted back toward the shaft, and hit the rope like I'd been thrown. I was halfway up when something screamed from below. Not loud, but broken. Not human. Not animal. Like rusted metal dragging across wet teeth. Sean and Marcus yanked me out. I hit the ground, boots first, knees failing. "Seal it," I said. They thought I was joking until they saw my face. We collapsed the opening with a charge from the truck's emergency kit. Just gravel and rocks, nothing major. Enough to keep curious hikers from making it worse. But that wasn't the end. That night, at our camp near the tree line, I woke to a faint scratching sound. I thought it was an animal. When I checked, I found a spiral of small stones laid next to my boots, the same spiral that had been carved on the wall below. No one had left the tent. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. We cut the survey short, called in the site as unstable, and flagged it for closure. The mining company wasn't happy, but I didn't care. That should have been it. But a week after I got home, I found a handprint on the inside of my garage wall. Small, 5 fingers, pressed hard into drywall dust. A few days later, my dog stopped going into the basement. She'd stand at the top of the stairs and growl at nothing. Then the voices started. At first, I thought it was the neighbors. Then I heard my mother's voice, soft, gentle, calling me by a childhood nickname she hadn't used in 20 years. But she'd been dead since 2005. Then came Sean's voice. Then Marcus. Then mine. All of them saying the same phrase. "Don't go. Don't go." I moved 3 months later. New town. New job. New locks. It didn't help. Every few weeks, I hear the scraping from behind walls, inside pipes, under the sink. Sometimes, late at night, the vents hum with breath that isn't mine. And every year, on the anniversary of that job, I find something small in my basement. One year it was a lump of coal, wet and warm. One year it was a piece of string tied in a spiral. Last year, it was a child's shoe. Not dirty, not aged, brand new. You can believe it or not. It doesn't change anything. The hollow under Broken Pine Ridge is still there, even if it's buried. And it remembers. It wants things back, and it doesn't care how long that takes. I joined the National Service Trail Program after quitting a cushy internship in Nashville. Not because I hated engineering, but because everything in my life felt manufactured. My job, my apartment, even my friendships were algorithmic, ordered, filtered, and draining. I needed something raw, something uncomfortable. When the opportunity came up to do remote survey and restoration work in a neglected part of the southern Appalachians, specifically the Shale Creek Hollow region of Georgia, I jumped at it. No cell reception, no noise, just trail crew living, sore backs, smoky fire pits, and the dirt under your fingernails kind of peace. That was the idea anyway. Our team was 5 people, all contracted by the state for environmental trail assessments and wilderness safety markers. I was the youngest and newest. The others included Briggs, mid-30s tall, always chewing sunflower seeds, ex-wildland firefighter. Marta, wiry, blunt, sharp with a hatchet, and even sharper with sarcasm. Sean, quiet and observant, didn't speak unless it mattered. Dale, the crew lead, ex-Army Corps guy, knew the woods like a second language. We met up in Ellijay, loaded our packs, and hiked out toward a section of forgotten trail supposedly marked decades ago during a failed state park expansion. The name Shale Creek Hollow didn't even show up on Google Maps anymore. The first warning sign came at the gas station outside the last town. The clerk, an older woman with cracked glasses and a voice like gravel, asked where we were headed. When Briggs told her, she just blinked slowly and said, "Don't follow the red markers." We laughed it off like you do. Some regional warning, some backwoods superstition. She didn't smile back. "Seriously," she said again. "Leave them be." We hiked out early the next morning. The trailhead was more like a memory than a path, overgrown, barely visible, flanked by pine saplings and blackberry bramble. But it was beautiful. Secluded, mossy, draped in that gentle haze the mountains get when the temperature shifts between breaths. For 2 days, it was perfect. We mapped collapsed switchbacks, logged stream crossings, flagged washed-out culverts. At night we built small fires and took turns telling dumb stories. Dale swore he'd seen a bear the size of a sedan. Marta roasted us for being city soft. Briggs smoked dried fish he carried in a vacuum-sealed pouch and offered it like a delicacy. The third morning, we saw the first red marker. A triangle, red paint, dripping slightly, drawn on the trunk of a beech tree maybe 20 feet off trail. At first, we figured it was an old blaze, the kind trail planners used in the 60s before metal tags became standard. But it was too fresh. No flaking nowhere. Just red. Wet looking. The paint ran like it had been applied yesterday. Probably local hunters, Dale muttered. Except there weren't any signs of hunting. No stands, no feed, no brass. Then we found more. 10, 20. All triangles. All slightly different sizes. Some small enough to be mistaken for handprints, others nearly shoulder width. John made a joke about pagan geometry. Briggs, however, got nervous. He started scanning the tree lines more often, whistling softly when we walked. That night, just before lights out, Marta said she'd seen something while filtering water at the creek. A shape between the trees, hunched, pale, not walking but gliding. No sound, no scent, just presence. She didn't push it. None of us did. The next morning, Sean was gone. His sleeping bag looked untouched, but his boots were missing. His radio, too. The only thing left was a single red triangle scrawled in the mud at the edge of camp. We called for hours. Dale tried climbing a ridge for signal. Briggs doubled back to a clearing we passed near a dry creek. Marta hiked north. Nothing. By dusk, the forest had gone dead quiet. No birds. No wind. Just the thrum of blood in your ears. We stayed up that night, sitting back to back by the fire, clutching cold coffee and bear spray like they meant something. No one spoke. Every snapped twig was a gunshot. Then came the dragging. It started softly, like a burlap sack being pulled over dry leaves. Then heavier, more deliberate, circling, close. No one moved. The firelight barely reached past the nearest trees. I kept trying to convince myself it was a deer, maybe a black bear, something logical. But the smell, God, the smell was anything but. Sweet, foul, like fermented meat soaked in syrup. And then a voice. Sean's voice, from just beyond the trees. Found something. Come see. Flat. Too calm. Like a voicemail played back at the wrong speed. We didn't go. At first light, Dale was gone too. His pack was still zipped. His axe still beside it. But his sleeping bag was empty, tied shut from the inside. There was no sign of a struggle. Just a red triangle painted across his tent flap. That's when Briggs lost it. He dumped his pack, stuffed a few supplies into a side bag, and said he was leaving, trail or no trail. Marta tried to stop him. He pushed past her and vanished into the woods. No trail, no compass, just raw panic. We waited hours. He didn't come back. Around sunset, we tried the satellite radio again. Still dead. Marta climbed a tree to check signal, nearly fell. We started arguing. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't open my food pouch. Every shadow felt like it was breathing. And then came the singing. Low. Repetitive. It wasn't a tune, just a rise and fall of vowel sounds, like a child trying to mimic a lullaby without understanding melody. It moved around us, never close, never far. Always just out of reach. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did Marta. We sat against the same tree, clutching our tools like they'd matter when whatever it was came back. But by dawn, she was gone too. No footprints. No sound. Just her necklace, a silver coin on a chain, looped neatly over a branch. And of course, another red triangle. I wandered after that. Days, maybe. I lost track. The trail markers had all vanished. The woods seemed to change around me. Trees rearranged, moss grew backward, rocks appeared where none had been. My map stopped matching anything I saw. I stopped eating, stopped thinking, just moved. Then I found a structure. Not a cabin. Not really. More like a pit with walls, logs driven into the ground, stacked around a sunken center. Inside were the others. Not alive. Briggs, Dale, Marta, Sean, all arranged in unnatural positions. Limbs folded the wrong way. Heads tilted back too far. Joints bent like dolls forced into poses. Their eyes were gone. Not gouged, just missing. And the walls? Covered in red triangles. Hundreds. Some drawn. Others carved. One looked stitched in what I swear was human hair. I ran. Through undergrowth, through thorns, through mud. My shoes tore open. My lungs burned. But I didn't stop. I didn't stop until I slammed face first into an old park sign half buried in soil. When I looked up, I saw cars. A gravel lot. A man in a flannel holding a hiking pole dropped his coffee when he saw me. I collapsed. Rangers said I'd been missing 7 days. They found no bodies. No pit. No symbols. Just my shredded gear, soaked in creek water and smelling of rust. They said it was panic, dehydration, stress, but they never explained how I knew the names of the 4 volunteers who'd gone missing in 1978 on the same trail section. People I'd never heard of, never seen, never studied. The records had been sealed, and no one told me about the red triangle that had been etched into my shoulder blade. Burned in, still there, still red. Some places aren't meant to be mapped. Some trails are meant to be forgotten. Most people picture the mountains as healing, soft fog lifting through the trees, streams carving through moss-covered stone, wind sighing through old timber, like a place that forgives. I used to believe that too. Now I know better, because some parts of the mountains don't forgive anything. I wasn't looking for answers, or ghosts, or whatever people think they find out there. I just needed to disconnect, to forget. A few months prior, I'd had a full-blown breakdown, a panic attack in the middle of a client pitch that left me sobbing on the conference room floor, surrounded by half-finished renderings and silence. My therapist suggested time away. Real time. No screens. No deadlines. No white walls. So I booked a week solo in the Beach Glass Hollow region, near the Virginia-Kentucky border, an unmaintained sector of the Cumberland Stretch, once a firebreak zone, now reclaimed by the forest. The kind of place that didn't show up on most online trail maps unless you knew the name of an old ranger station that had burned down in the 80s. Perfect. I packed light. My only plan was to hike until my legs quit and my brain followed. No social media, no itinerary, just trees, sleep, and silence. And for the first 2 days it worked. Blue skies, no bugs, the kind of crisp mountain air that tastes like it was filtered through time. I passed one pair of hikers near Mudhorn Bluff. They didn't make eye contact, just kept walking. I liked that. That second night, I camped near a dry ravine, stretched out under a canopy of yellowed beech. The stars were brighter than I remembered. The fire cracked just enough to lull me to sleep. I remember thinking, I haven't felt this still in years. On the 3rd day, it changed. It started after I wandered off trail to photograph a rock face covered in strange linear striations, not quite carvings, not quite erosion. It was maybe 10:30 in the morning. I was hiking back toward the trail when I saw it. A staircase. Not a lookout platform. Not ruins. Just a freestanding, perfectly preserved set of stairs, made from pale concrete. 22 steps rising cleanly into nothing. No platform. No handrail. Just steps. No overgrowth. No moss. No damage. Like someone had installed it yesterday. I felt unsettled. Like I'd walked in on something private. A trespasser in a place that didn't want guests. I took a few steps toward it before stopping. My breath hitched. The air around the staircase felt denser. The trees nearby leaned away from it. The birds had gone silent. I turned and walked fast. Didn't run. Not yet. By early afternoon, I started to feel like the trail had changed. The pine was thicker. My compass showed conflicting directions. Even the dirt felt wrong beneath my boots, soft in places that should have been dry. And then came the buzzing. Not bees, not mosquitoes, but a low hum, like electricity bleeding from a wall socket. I took my pack off and checked my phone, still dead. GPS unresponsive. The battery pack I'd brought showed zero charge, even though I hadn't used it. Around 3 p.m., I found another staircase. This one was wooden, old, warped, covered in vines, but the steps were intact. And again, it led to nowhere. Worse, it faced me. That felt deliberate. I didn't get close. I didn't even look long. I just kept walking. By nightfall, I'd lost the trail entirely. The forest had changed again. The trees grew in tighter clusters. Some were charred, as if a fire had swept through long ago, but there were no burned scents, no ash. That night, I didn't pitch my tent. I didn't light a fire. I curled up under an outcrop and held my multi-tool in one hand. I heard no animals, just that hum, and once footsteps. Slow, uneven, pausing occasionally like someone listening. In the morning, I found prints near my sleeping spot. Barefoot, but not human. Each foot had 6 toes, long and slender, tipped with what looked like claw imprints. No heel, just pads. They ended 10 feet away from where I'd slept. No approach, no departure, like something had appeared, watched, and vanished. I kept moving, but the trail didn't return. I walked for what felt like hours before stumbling across the ruins of what might have been a ranger's lean-to, collapsed timbers, some rusted wire, a faded laminated sign too weathered to read. And behind it, the third staircase, iron, bolted into stone, but rustless, clean, like it had never been touched by time or weather. I screamed that time, just stood there and screamed at it, cursed at it, begged for something to make sense. And then I heard it, laughter, not loud, but wrong, mocking, offbeat, and far too close. I bolted, ran until my legs buckled, ate the last of my protein bars with shaking hands, refilled my water from a puddle that smelled like iron. I didn't care. My mouth tasted like rust anyway. Late on the 5th day, or what I thought was the 5th, I reached a clearing. Perfectly circular. Trees felled evenly at the same height, surrounding a patch of flat, blackened soil. And in the center was the last staircase, made of polished stone, spiral, unblemished, like something that belonged in a temple or crypt. At the top stood a figure, tall, thin, arms too long, wearing a black suit, no a cloak. It shimmered oddly like cloth underwater. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt it in my head, like a presence pressing inward, flooding my thoughts with static. My eyes burned, my nose bled. I collapsed. When I came to, the clearing was gone. I was lying in mud beside a Park Service road near Birch Hollow Lookout. A ranger truck was idling 30 feet away. A young guy in a wide-brim hat was asking me questions. His lips moved, but I couldn't hear him at first. He said I'd been missing 3 days, but I remembered 5, maybe more. They found my pack and phone fully intact, but my compass had melted, warped like plastic. My boots were covered in a fine red dust they couldn't identify. I didn't file a report, didn't explain the stairs, didn't tell anyone about the thing at the top. They'd have called it stress, sleep deprivation, delusion. But I remember the sound it made, the hum that still haunts my dreams, a frequency that vibrates somewhere beneath hearing. Sometimes late at night, when the world goes quiet enough, I still feel it, buzzing behind my ears. And once, just once, I found dirt on my carpet, a trail of 6-toed prints, leading to the stairs outside my apartment. Not real stairs, just the ones in my dream. But I never sleepwalked before. I've spent most of my adult life in the woods, not as some mystical recluse or park ranger cliché, but as a wildlife consultant. My job was to assess animal activity for private landowners, survey trails, and occasionally tranquilize a bear that wandered too far into someone's summer plans. I've been charged by elk, slept through a blizzard in a wet sleeping bag, once had to play dead for 6 minutes straight while a black bear sniffed my face. I thought I understood fear. I didn't. That lesson came the year I took a contract to help a private land trust convert old coal trails into public hiking loops near the Georgia-North Carolina border, in a region called Kepler's Bend. A dense tangle of ridgelines and flood-cut hollows, forgotten, unincorporated, and mostly erased from maps after a series of landslides decades ago. Locals didn't speak of it much. I should have noticed that, but at the time, I just saw an opportunity to disappear for a few weeks. My marriage was dissolving quietly. My career had dried up after I turned down a government position, and my phone had become a carrier of bad news. So I accepted the job. They gave me a small stipend and 3 volunteers, trail rehab interns out of Atlanta, all in their 20s, all looking for something bigger than themselves. Kenji was upbeat, always sketching. Steph was practical and a bit cynical, but funny in a dry way. And Mira, the quiet one, she took photos constantly but rarely showed them. I liked them. They reminded me of who I used to be. We met in a gravel lot outside Oak Run, the last town before Kepler's Bend turned into unclaimed dirt roads. The forest there doesn't feel wild. It feels asleep, like something ancient curled in on itself. The trail they assigned us to rebuild didn't have a real name. The maps called it Line 5B, a logging cut abandoned in the early 70s after 3 bridges collapsed in the same season. But someone had written the Wall Trail in pencil across the edge of the schematic. I asked the land agent about it. He just muttered, "Locals get poetic about erosion," and changed the subject. So we hiked in. The first day was standard, marking elevation dips, clearing brush, tagging anything that looked like a hazard. We made camp near a dry creek and shared freeze-dried stew by headlamp. Steph asked if I believed in energy, not in a mystical way, just vibes. I said some places hum louder than others. The next morning, I found a carving on a cedar tree near our camp. 3 straight lines, stacked vertically, etched deep. Too clean to be natural. Too fresh to be old. Probably from some hunter, I said. But there was something in Myra's eyes, like she recognized it. Later that day, the forest grew denser. The light changed. Not darker, just off. The way fluorescent lights buzz before dying. Then came the wall. That's what we called it anyway. A massive slab of stone, half buried in the hillside, stretching for nearly 50 feet. Not a cliff, not a formation. It looked built, smooth, unnaturally flat, and marked with dozens of those vertical line symbols. 3, 6, 9, always in sets of 3. Mira took photos. Steph asked if it was a boundary marker. Kenji whispered, "I think it's older than the trail." That night, the woods were too quiet. No frogs, no insects, not even the whisper of wind. I dreamed of deep water and something moving through it, not swimming but pushing. I woke to find Kenji staring out into the dark, flashlight off. "Did you hear it?" he asked. I said no. He just nodded and said, "It doesn't like when we talk." The next morning, I found his sketchbook left on a rock. It was filled with eyes. Not cartoon eyes. Not symbolic. Realistic, wide, unblinking. Dozens of them all staring forward. Kenji was gone. We searched for 3 hours. Called his name. Blew the emergency whistle. No sign. Not a broken branch. Not a footprint. Nothing. We debated hiking back, but the trail behind us looked wrong. Overgrown in places we'd cleared the day before. Even the trees seemed different, too tightly packed, bark darker than it should have been. Mira and Steph were silent most of that day. That night, none of us slept. At some point, I noticed Mira was missing. I found her 20 feet away from camp, standing perfectly still with her camera in her hands, lens pointed at the trees. She said she'd seen lights. Not fireflies, tall lights, like blue-white torches floating silently between the trunks. She said they moved in 3s. When I took her camera, the photos were all blank. Except one, a blurry figure, half hidden behind a tree, tall, with no face. The forest started whispering again. Muffled, rhythmic. 3 words, always 3, always repeating. Stay. Forget. Stay. Steph lost it after that. Started yelling into the woods, cursing at nothing. then suddenly stopped and said, "It's building something. It's making room." She began stacking rocks methodically, whispering numbers under her breath. 3, 6, 9. That night, Mira vanished. No scream. No rustling. Just gone. I found her boots lying neatly outside her tent. Inside was a photo print. Not from her camera. An old Polaroid, faded and water-stained. It showed the three of us sleeping, taken from above. I burned it. Steph and I packed up at first light. No more trail work. No more surveying. We just wanted out. But the trail was gone. The map no longer matched the terrain. Every ridge felt the same. Every path looped. Every compass, even the analog one, spun slowly in place. Around noon, Steph began talking to someone I couldn't see. She said it was Mira, that she was just ahead, that we needed to keep following. I tried to stop her. She looked at me, eyes hollow, and said, "You don't belong here." Then she walked into the trees. I never saw her again. I hiked in a straight line. North, south, it didn't matter. I kept walking, ate tree bark, slept in holes. I stopped keeping track of time. Eventually I heard water. The forest thinned, and I saw a road. 2 hikers found me crawling across it, bloody and sunburned and barely able to speak. I was airlifted out. Doctors said I was dehydrated, delusional, suffering from prolonged isolation. The Land Trust never responded to my emails. The ranger station at Oak Run closed, and no record of Kepler's Bend on any geological registry. Just green. Blank. I don't go near the mountains anymore. Not alone. Not at all. Because sometimes I still hear it, in the woods behind my house. That hum. That whisper. And once, I woke to find 3 vertical lines scratched into my bedroom window. Back in the fall of 2022, I did something dumb. After stepping away from teaching and spending too long locked up in my small apartment, I decided to finally act on a lifelong obsession with obscure folklore. I'd been writing this blog, Dust and Holler, just a little corner of the internet where I collected strange local legends, roadside rituals, and half-remembered campfire tales from the southeast. The page had maybe 100 followers, but I treated it like gospel. One story in particular kept catching my eye, a little-known regional myth about something called the Ground Singer of Ash Fork Ridge. Most of the mentions were fragmented, bits of conversation in old forums, a footnote in a 1960s field diary archived by a ranger, and one chilling paragraph in a self-published hiking memoir. They all repeated the same theme: don't walk west of Ash Fork after the sun touches the horizon. Something there starts to wake up, something that sings beneath the soil. Naturally, I had to see for myself. I planned a 3-day solo hike through a barely used stretch of Pisgah National Forest near the Tennessee border, past Brevard, near a snarl of unnamed ridges the locals just call the Writhings. I had a permit, offline topographic maps, a pack full of backup batteries, and a satellite beacon clipped to my shoulder strap. I knew the terrain wouldn't be easy. That was the point. But knowing the land and understanding it, different things entirely. My starting point was a sleepy place called Mullins Pass. Not even a town, really, just a general store, an out-of-business auto shop, and a handful of homes hunched in the shadows like they were hiding from something. I stayed at a guest cabin rented by a woman named Alma. She was kind but cautious, only spoke in full sentences when I brought up my research. "You know what the ridges are, right?" she asked over coffee on my first morning. "They're folds, wrinkles, mountains that never finish standing up straight." I smiled, nodding like I knew where this was going. Her voice dropped. "Some folks think things slipped into the cracks when they were young, things still breathing under the old folds." She didn't say more, just offered me boiled eggs and told me not to hike past that place where the black fern grows flat. Whatever that meant. I brushed it off as small-town mysticism. That was mistake number 1. The trail started off normal, just narrow switchbacks and dense pine walls on either side. The deeper I hiked, the more it felt like I was moving backward in time. The air grew heavy and damp, as if the canopy filtered out not just the sun, but time itself. Around noon on day 2, I stumbled onto something bizarre, a ring of flat ferns, just like Alma had described. They looked like they'd been pressed with a rolling pin. I crouched to take a photo, and that's when I saw it, a footprint. Barefoot, but the toes were fused, almost like a hoof had tried to imitate a human foot. The ball was wide and spread, like it had been gripping earth for centuries. And there were more. Faint, leading west, beyond where my map ended. My logical brain told me to mark the location and turn back. But folklore thrives on trespassers. So I followed. Within 15 minutes, I knew something was wrong. The trees grew too close together, like ribs pinching inward. Every step was muffled. Even my gear, keys, water bottle, the plastic sheath on my hiking pole, felt dull, like the air was thickening around me. Then came the smell. It wasn't rot. Not exactly. More like brine, salt and iron soaked in wildflowers left to die in a sealed room. That's when I heard it. A sound from beneath me. Not below the ridge. Beneath my boots. It was faint, like someone humming through soil. I froze, and the sound stopped. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw movement, something pale darting between the trees ahead. My first thought was a deer. Then I realized it was upright, and too tall. I should have turned around. Instead, I followed the tracks deeper until I reached a clearing, and saw it. A structure, barely visible through the overgrowth. Not a cabin, not a ruin. More like a mound with a doorway torn into it, lined with splintered beams that looked almost fossilized. I stepped toward it. Every instinct in me screamed to stop, but my hand pushed the door open anyway. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. The floor sloped downward into a crude pit about 5 feet across. It smelled of mildew and lavender, sweet and wrong. I pointed my flashlight down. The pit was filled with soft dirt, but something was pulsing beneath it, rising and falling. Slow, like breath. Then the singing returned. This time clearer. A high, broken voice humming in a strange, looping rhythm. Not a tune. More like a chant. But there were no words. Just intention. I backed away, and from behind me, I heard a second voice join the first. This one closer. Softer. Female? I turned and saw nothing. But something had stepped out of the trees. I could smell it, wet moss and warm iron. The singing continued, circling the mound now. Every direction. Like something was calling to whatever slept in the pit. I ran. I bolted through the clearing, branches tearing at my sleeves. I made it 50 yards before I slipped down a slope and tumbled into a shallow ditch. My flashlight flew from my hand. When I grabbed it and turned it on, there were faces. Not people. Impressions. Pressed into the soil. As if someone had pushed screaming mouths and wide, eyeless sockets into the dirt like handprints in wet concrete. I scrambled out and kept running. The woods twisted. I passed the same dead tree 3 times. A gnarled thing with bark torn open like ribs. The singing never faded. It was below me now, under the trail, echoing from root systems and buried stone. Eventually I stopped, out of breath, heart pounding, unsure which direction was real anymore. Then I saw light. Not the sun. Something dull and orange, flickering through the trees. I followed it. What I found was a fire tower. Rusted. Abandoned. Its base half sunken into the hill. But someone or something had lit a fire beside it. No tracks. No warmth. Just the flame and a bell. A bronze bell sitting in the dirt. The kind you'd see in a church, except smaller, like it was meant to be held. When I stepped closer, the singing stopped. Dead silence. Then a voice whispered in my ear, "Take it." I turned in circles. Nothing was there. The fire had gone out. And now the bell was gone too. In its place was a mound of dirt with breath marks in it. Rising. Falling. Waiting. That was enough for me. I don't remember getting back to the trail. Just the blur of trees and the sound of humming chasing me uphill. When I reached the Forest Service road, I nearly collapsed. A ranger found me walking barefoot, my boots were missing, and babbling something about songs in the ground. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days. They called it temporary disassociation. I told no one about the cabin, or the faces in the dirt, or the bell. 2 weeks later, I checked the satellite map again. No trace of the fire tower, or the clearing, or even Ash Fork Ridge. Just green blur and empty coordinates. I stopped blogging after that, deleted the site, stopped researching local legends. But every so often, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I hear a sound from below my apartment floor. It's faint, like someone humming through layers of soil, the same off-key lullaby. And last week, I found flat ferns growing between the floorboards near my bed. I don't walk barefoot anymore, and I never sleep with my windows open, because some things don't stay buried. They wait, and they sing. I used to teach at a university, geology, mineralogy, tectonics, all that. For 15 years, I lectured students who barely looked up from their laptops while I talked about ancient mountains and shifting plates like it still mattered. But I hit a wall around 47. It wasn't sudden, just a slow erosion of meaning. Lectures got shorter. My office got quieter. Sleep became a stranger. So I did what every broken man with tenure and a savings account dreams of. I vanished. I bought a parcel of land in West Virginia, right along the edge of Cranberry Wilderness, near a place called Narrow Gap Hollow. That name should have told me everything. Locals said the land was private. In that way they say it through their teeth, with a nod that feels like a warning. But I didn't listen. To me, the location was perfect. Isolated, high up, no cell towers, no noise. Just an aging hunting cabin and miles of forest stretching in every direction. For the first week, I was euphoric. I chopped firewood, patched leaks, cooked over coals. I could feel my bones uncoiling. Even the silence felt sacred, like the earth was letting me breathe again. Then the symbols started showing up. First, a triangle made of twigs appeared right outside my door. At first glance, I figured it was nothing. Wind, maybe. Some kid's old prank. But the twigs weren't scattered. They were pressed into the earth, arranged with precision. By the third morning, there were 5 of them. Different shapes. Some were spirals. One resembled a lattice of jagged lines, like a fractured rib cage, all neatly placed within view of the front steps. Always facing the cabin. Never random. So I put up a trail cam. I'm not exactly a survivalist, but I'd brought a basic infrared motion cam for wildlife photography. I set it facing the porch, just to confirm it was raccoons or deer dragging branches around. 3 days later, I checked it. The latch was untouched. The camera hadn't been moved. But the SD card was gone. Not stolen. Removed. And placed, perfectly centered, on my pillow inside the cabin. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the edge of the bed, listening. But the woods were dead quiet. Not even insects. Just the wind scraping tree limbs like old bones dragging across bark. 2 days later, I found something hanging above the creek behind the cabin. It was a buck, or used to be. Its legs were snapped backward, and its spine twisted in a way that defied anatomy. The antlers were jammed into the mud below, like it had been dropped from the sky and pinned to the earth. Its eyes were gone, but not plucked, just missing, as if the sockets had never existed. The blood had turned dark and clotted. But what chilled me was the smell, not of decay, but copper. Sharp and clean, like old pennies rubbed raw. I should have left then. Instead, I rationalized. Maybe a rogue predator? Maybe poachers playing some sick joke. That night, I bolted the door, locked the windows, and sat awake with a lantern and a fire poker. I told myself it was just fear playing tricks, that I wasn't hearing footsteps outside the cabin around 2 a.m. But then something knocked. 3 times. Not frantic, not aggressive, just measured. I stood up too fast and knocked over the lantern. The shadows danced and stretched in every direction. My breath caught as I waited for another knock. It didn't come. Instead, I heard it speak. A voice. From just outside the cabin wall. You're standing where it eats. Not shouted, not whispered, just stated, with a cold certainty that made my stomach turn. The voice sounded like it was being gargled, like breath forced through a flooded throat. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I waited until morning, then opened the door. Outside, the ground was bare, but above the porch, tied to the rafter with braided hair, was my missing SD card, dangling like bait, and beneath it, arranged in a perfect circle, were a dozen small bones. Rabbit? Squirrel? I didn't check. Instead, I walked into town that day and bought a dozen brass bells from an antique shop. I wired them around the clearing every 10 feet, hoping the noise would serve as some kind of alarm. It worked briefly. That night, I woke to a sound like wind chimes gone mad. Every bell jangled at once, as though something massive had swept through them all in a single pass. Then silence. I stepped out with a flashlight and froze. The bells were still swaying gently, but tied together, each string braided into the next like a garland. All of them looped into a single massive knot hanging from my door handle. And behind me 3 knocks. But this time on the roof. Heavy ones. Like something had landed up there. Something that didn't care about creaking wood or roof tiles. I stayed inside until dawn. When I finally ventured out, I found hoof prints in the dirt, too long to be deer, too wide to be horse. Each one faced toward the cabin, and each was filled with stagnant water, even though it hadn't rained in a week. That's when I started to believe the stories. I went back to that antique shop, told the old man behind the counter what was happening. He didn't laugh. He just asked one question. Did the old trees bow when you walked in? I didn't understand. He explained that Narrow Gap Hollow was believed to be cursed ground, not haunted, not sacred. Claimed by something ancient. The locals call it the Grin Hollow because the forest there smiles. Trees bow inward, curving over paths, pulling people in. He said whatever lives there doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be remembered. And if you leave with memory, he said, it follows. I left the bells behind. Left the land, the gear, the maps, the trail cams. Everything. I only took a flashlight and the keys to my truck. The hike back to the road was short, just 4 miles, but it felt longer than any trek I've ever done. Every shadow twitched. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper. And I swear I heard it again. The voice. Not close this time. Distant. But it was singing. A slow, slurred melody, like a lullaby played backward. I didn't run. That was the one rule the antique man gave me. Never run. Running means your prey. So I walked. Deliberately. Eyes forward. Until I reached my truck. I climbed in, locked the doors, and turned the engine over. That's when I looked at the rearview mirror. There was a handprint on the back windshield. 5 fingers, but only 4 claw marks. The pinky was just skin. No nail. No bone. Like it had melted. I drove until the sun rose. Rented a room in a town 30 miles away, and didn't tell a soul. I barely slept. I stared at the window all night, listening for bells, for singing, for knocking. It's been a year since then. Sometimes I dream of trees that lean too far inward, of porches that knock back, of bones arranged like prayers. Sometimes I wake up and find a twig triangle on my pillow. Once, I found a bell in my mailbox. No note, no postage. I buried it 6 feet deep in concrete. But some nights, just before 3 a.m., I still hear it. 3 knocks. Always 3. And the whisper. This place remembers. I've walked into a lot of places that didn't want me there. That's the job, sort of. My name's Emmett, I'm 38, and I work for a historical conservation agency. Mostly I scout neglected state park land that's been closed off, old trails, fire towers, stuff like that, evaluate what can be restored, what's too far gone, and report back. No ghost stories, no cryptids, no spooky legends. That wasn't me, until October 3 years ago. I was assigned a stretch of backcountry in McDowell County, West Virginia. Locals called it the Hollow Trail, even though no such trail exists on official maps. There used to be a small mining camp nearby called Embers Notch, abandoned sometime after World War II. The land had reverted to state ownership, but no one had touched it in decades. I didn't think much of it. I'd done similar jobs around Catoctin and the Allegheny Front. Packed my gear, grabbed my notepad, and drove out. Weather was cold, dry. The kind of air that makes your nose sting in the morning, and the trees whisper more than they should. My companion for the trip was a guy named Henry. He was in his mid-40s, a freelance cartographer contracted by the agency. Good at reading terrain, terrible at reading people. He talked almost non-stop, mostly about old civilian conservation corps maps and how the government used to hide unsanctioned roads for testing. We set out from the service road, just past Elkhorn. Within an hour, I realized we were walking into something off. Not evil, not haunted, just wrong. The trees leaned too tightly over the old path. Ferns sprouted in patches of frost. There were no birds, no squirrels, no rustling. The silence wasn't peaceful. It pressed against your eardrums like a sealed room. 3 miles in, we found the first anomaly. An arch made from 2 pale tree trunks, bound together at the top with barbed wire and human hair. Yes, human. I've worked in search and rescue. I've seen trauma sites. You know what scalp hair looks like when it's not from a wig. Henry brushed it off. Called it Appalachian theater. He had a theory about reclusive artists using the woods as installation space. Like Banksy, but hill folk, he joked. I didn't laugh. That night, we set camp near what looked like the skeletal remains of an old ranger station. Just floorboards and one crumbling wall. While we cooked beans, Henry kept talking about a legend he'd read online. Something about the skin bell of Ember's Notch. Supposedly, a preacher had gone mad after a mine cave-in took his family. They said he tried to call their spirits back with a bell made from his own face. Sounds like Reddit creepypasta, I told him. He chuckled. Yeah, but fun, right? It wasn't fun the next morning. Henry was gone. No sign of a struggle. Just his boots sitting upright at the edge of camp, pointing downslope toward a thicket of birches. I should have packed up and called it in, but my radio wasn't catching a signal, and my phone had been dead since we passed that barbed arch. I decided to follow the trail I assumed he wandered down. That's when I saw them. Bells. Dozens of them. Tied to tree limbs with sinew, some no larger than a thimble, others the size of lanterns. They were made from metal, bone, even ceramic. Most were broken or fused shut with rust. A few swayed gently in the cold air, but they didn't make a sound. Not even when one brushed my shoulder. The clearing itself was worse. In its center was a small stone building, maybe a root cellar once, half collapsed into the earth. Someone, or something, had carved symbols around the entrance. Some looked Norse. Others looked like claw marks. And above the door hung a bell the size of a human head, its clapper missing, its surface blackened like it had been burned. I didn't go inside. I'm not brave, but I did call for Henry. I wish I hadn't. From the trees behind me came the sound of that bell, once low and hollow, but not from the one I could see. It reverberated in my bones. And then I heard his voice. Emmett, don't go. She's inside. She's beautiful. I ran. But no matter how far I went, the trail kept folding in on itself. I passed the same fallen log 3 times. My compass spun. My notepad pages blackened on their own. No ink, just warped and burned from the center out. That night, I didn't sleep. I saw flashes of light between the trees. A figure standing by my fire, no eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched over a too long skull. Her arms ended in points, like rusted pruning shears. She didn't move, but every time I blinked, she was closer. I think I fainted, or my brain shut down. Either way, I woke up in daylight. My tent was intact. My bag was untouched. But something was tied to the zipper, a small bell. It was made from what looked like a baby's tooth, bound in blonde hair. I snapped. I screamed into the woods, tore up the camp, threw the bell as far as I could. But when I turned around, it was tied back onto the zipper. Fresh. I gave up trying to escape logically. I made a fire and burned the bell. It screamed, not in the way metal screams when it heats up, but like a pig being slaughtered. And the trees, they shuddered. The forest pushed me out after that. I don't know how. One moment I was slumped in the dirt, half delirious, and the next I was face down in gravel beside a forestry truck. The ranger who found me said he was making a routine supply run and almost didn't see me. My report was deemed inconclusive. No sign of Henry. No evidence of the bells. No record of any preacher or skin bell legend. Ember's Notch isn't even listed on geological surveys anymore. I checked. Twice. I didn't talk about it publicly until last year, when I started hearing from other hikers. People describing strange bells in different parts of the Appalachians, Tennessee, Virginia, even northern Georgia. All vanishing trails. All missing companions. All silence, followed by the ringing. You want to hear the part that makes my skin crawl? Last month, a woman emailed me anonymously. Said she used to live near a place called Ember's Notch before her family moved in the 60s. Said her grandfather told her never to ring the forest's teeth, or she'd hear the bride. The bride? I wrote back. She didn't reply, but a package showed up a week later. No return address. Inside was a single, rusted bell, tied with blonde hair. I didn't keep it. I buried it 10 miles out and poured salt over the site. Haven't gone near the woods since. I moved apartments, top floor, no trees within view. I keep my windows shut and locked, even in summer. But sometimes, just past 3 a.m., I hear a faint ring, like a spoon tapping porcelain. Soft, but getting closer. If you ever find a bell in the woods, don't ring it. Don't touch it. And for the love of whatever you believe in, don't listen to the voice calling your name. Because it's not calling you back. It's calling you in. There's a kind of quiet in the mountains that doesn't feel like peace. It's too still, too deep. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring just to remind you you're alive. That's what I was chasing when I bought the house up near Crooked Gap, West Virginia. I'd spent the last 12 years in emergency response, patching up overdoses and traffic collisions. Long shifts, screaming radios, people dying with their eyes wide open. It started to take things from me. Sleep, sanity, my marriage. I cashed out what little retirement I had early and left Huntington behind. Just me, a packed truck, and a house I'd found on a sketchy land auction site. No plumbing, no power. It backed up against the edge of Monksville Forest, a place I'd only heard about in whispers from old-timers who said the trees there remembered different. I didn't care about legends. I needed somewhere to disappear. The cabin sat on sloping earth about 5 miles up a gutted logging road. The porch sagged. The roof leaked. But the bones were good, and the air smelled like pine sap and wood smoke. There was no cell signal, no noise, and no neighbors for miles. Perfect. The old man who handed me the deed didn't say much. Just stared at the tree line and muttered, "You hear anything climbing after dark, don't answer. Some things don't know their place anymore." I smiled like I understood. I didn't. The first few nights were quiet, cold but manageable. I slept under wool blankets by the wood stove and read paperback crime novels I'd brought in a duffel bag. Days were filled with small chores, clearing brush, sealing window gaps, keeping my hands busy. I was starting to feel human again. Then came the tapping. It started on the third night. A faint, slow series of knocks. Not at the door, but from underneath the house, like something gently knocking from the crawl space. 3 beats. Pause. 3 more. At first, I chalked it up to the wood contracting in the cold, but then I saw the stairs. It was around 2 a.m. I'd gotten up to check the stove when something through the back window caught my eye. A silhouette in the moonlight. A staircase. Not attached to anything. Just standing. Roughly 20 paces into the woods, where I had gathered firewood the day before. It hadn't been there then. I turned on the back porch light. No stairs. Turned it off. They were back. 12 steps. Stone. Straight. Old but intact. Leading nowhere. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I convinced myself it was some kind of trick. A tree stump. A weird shadow. Maybe my brain was finally cashing in after a decade of trauma. But when I walked out back, the stairs were there. Real. Cold to the touch. Covered in a fine frost, but no snow around it. I walked circles around it, even crouched down to look underneath. Nothing. Just pine needles and dirt. I didn't climb them. Couldn't have told you why, but the thought never crossed my mind. There was something wrong in the way they just sat there. By the next morning, they'd moved. Not far, maybe 6 feet closer to the cabin. I noticed because the branches I'd piled near the tree line were pushed aside, like something had cleared a path. That's when the headaches started. A low pulse at the base of my skull, like a tension migraine with no trigger. And the ringing, a deep, tonal hum that buzzed just below hearing, like the cabin itself was vibrating. My truck wouldn't start either. The lights worked. The radio crackled, but the engine wouldn't turn over. Not even a click. So I walked. Tried to follow the service road downhill to the main highway. But every time I checked my direction, I was looping back toward the house. No matter how far I walked, the tree line bent around me like it was curling in, guiding me back. When I finally gave up and returned, the stairs were pressed against the back porch. Waiting. That night, I boarded the windows and locked every door. I could still hear the stairs, not creaking, not clanging. Just footsteps. Climbing. Descending. Always in threes. I didn't dare look outside. Didn't sleep either. At some point, I blacked out sitting against the door with my hunting rifle in my lap. When I woke up, it was dawn, and there were wet footprints on the floor inside the house. Bare, narrow, with too many toes. I threw up. My hands shook so bad I could barely light the stove. That day I tried to burn the stairs. I doused them with gasoline, lit a rag, threw it from the porch. The flame caught, then vanished. Like a gust of wind had snatched it away. Not a scorch mark, not a singe. The stairs didn't even smell of fuel. That's when she started showing up. The woman, always after midnight, standing at the top of the stairs. She was tall, way too tall. Her limbs hung low, like her elbows were mounted wrong. Skin sagging in folds, gray and wet looking, like she'd spent too long underwater. No hair, no clothes. Her face was a stretch of skin, no eyes, no mouth. Just a slit of jaw swinging loosely, too wide, too still. And the sound, it didn't come from her mouth. It came from her chest. A low hum, constant, like a generator buried under stone. A sound I could feel more than hear. It made my fillings ache, my vision blur. She never climbed down, just stood at the top of those impossible stairs, staring at me through the boarded window. And then she was gone. For days, I didn't sleep. My nails tore from scratching at the walls in my dreams. I'd wake up outside, standing on the porch barefoot. One morning I found myself on the 5th step, bleeding from the knees with no memory of climbing. I tried tying myself to the table before sleep. I still woke up unbound, with muddy prints on my chest. Every night, she returned. And every night, the stairs changed, stone one night with the next, sometimes marble or steel. But always 12 steps. Always silent. On the 10th night, I gave up. Grabbed what I could, water, flashlight, knife, and ran into the trees. I didn't care where I ended up. I just needed to put distance between myself and whatever was crawling through my life. I made it about a mile before I collapsed. I remember the sky. Red. Not sunrise red. Wrong red. Like backlit flesh. And the staircase behind me, visible even through the trees. Like it was following. I woke up in a ranger's ATV. A woman named Sarah found me lying face down across a fallen log. She said I was lucky. Said people go missing in Monksville all the time. Said I wasn't the first to come stumbling out of those woods babbling about staircases and sounds and things with no mouths. She didn't laugh. Didn't ask for details. Just offered me a granola bar and pointed toward town. I sold the cabin the next week for half what I paid. Left everything behind, even my grandfather's watch. I didn't care. I live in Charleston now, middle of the city. Streetlights, sirens, constant noise. I sleep with the TV on, and every mirror covered, because sometimes on the edge of sleep, I hear footsteps. 3 at a time, climbing. And when I wake up, my feet are always cold. It started as a detour. I was 33, working odd hours with the National Park Service as a seasonal maintenance hand. Not glamorous, oil changes, generator repairs, the occasional trail ATV tow. but it got me away from people and paid enough to keep gas in my truck. I'd just finished a job up in Fayette County, West Virginia, replacing a busted water line at a campsite nobody used anymore, and was heading down toward a friend's place outside Meadow Fork. The route was familiar, winding roads through thinning coal towns, forests reclaiming what was once stripped bare. Except this time, I took a wrong turn. No signs, no GPS, just fog and instinct, and next thing I knew, I was winding up an unfamiliar mountain pass marked only by a rusted county marker that said, Widow's Bend. There wasn't much to it, a narrow, two-lane road carved into a slope so steep I could feel the wheel tremble every time the shoulder eroded beneath the weight of my tires. The woods on either side pressed in too close, like they'd grown spitefully after the road was cut. I figured I'd drive it out, see where it led. Maybe it had dropped me back on Route 60. But somewhere past mile marker 8, if you could call a moss-covered stake a marker, my gut started twisting. No service, no headlights behind me, just the crunch of gravel and the quiet hum of engine strain. Then I saw it, not far ahead, near a turnout on the left, just past where the road bent sharply. There was a figure standing near the tree-line. Not walking, not moving, just standing. At first, I thought it was a person, maybe a hiker or some drunk waiting for a tow. But the longer I stared, the less sense it made. Too tall, arms hanging too far down, almost mid-thigh. Even in the fading light, I could see that the head was tilted too far to the left, like something was broken inside the neck, but no one had told the body. I passed it, tried not to look, just pressed the gas a little harder and told myself I'd imagined it. 5 minutes later, I saw it again. Different turnout, different bend, same shape, still unmoving, still watching, still wrong. That's when I pulled over. There was a gravel shoulder tucked against a steep ridge cut, just wide enough to pull over without risking being clipped by anyone speeding through the fog. I killed the engine and stepped out, telling myself I just needed to stretch. But I think I needed proof that I hadn't completely lost it. The moment my boots hit the gravel, I knew something was off. The woods were dead silent. No wind, no crickets, no rustling. Even my own truck seemed too quiet, like the engine had shut off more completely than physics should allow. Then I heard it, a footstep, just one, behind me, across the road in the trees. A heavy, deliberate crunch in the pine needles. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there, spine prickling, waiting for a second footstep. When it didn't come, I turned slowly, and there it was, about 20 feet into the trees. Tall, still, barely visible through the branches. But this time I saw more. Its arms were too thin, hands dangling lower than they should. The chest didn't rise and fall, no breath, no sound. And the head was wrong. There was no face, just a stretch of something like skin, taut and pale, like leather pulled too tight over a basketball. But it knew I was looking. Even without eyes, it knew. I backed toward the truck, nice and slow. Didn't even shut the door before I turned the key and gunned it. The road whipped by in a blur after that. Every hairpin curve felt like a dare. Trees leaned closer. Fog thickened. My ears started ringing like I'd climbed too fast in an airplane. Then I saw it again, dead center in the road, just standing. I slammed the brakes. Tires screamed. My seatbelt locked across my chest like a slap. I skidded to a stop 20 feet away from it. It didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there, arms limp, head tilted even further to the side, almost resting on its shoulder now. I threw the truck in reverse, backed up half a mile until I could make a turn on a blind hill, and took the first overgrown trail I saw veering off the main road. That was the second mistake. The dirt road twisted for maybe a mile before ending at a long abandoned pullout, a place with a rotten picnic table and a cracked concrete slab that might have been a trailhead 30 years ago. I parked, killed the lights, and sat. I waited for 20 minutes. Nothing. Then I saw motion in the rearview mirror, just for a second, behind the truck. I turned. Nothing. But the woods were humming now. A deep, low-frequency buzz, like the power lines outside an old substation. It vibrated in my molars, made my vision pulse with each beat. I shut my eyes, told myself I was tired, stressed, hungry, that I'd driven too long without food or rest. I opened them. It was outside the window, just standing there, close enough to fog the glass. I screamed. I don't even remember turning the key, but the engine roared to life, and I slammed it into drive, swerved back onto the trail, and tore back toward the highway. The road bent. The truck jolted. I saw the slope too late. The front wheels caught gravel and pitched down. The world spun. Branches slapped the windshield. The truck came to a stop at the base of a ravine. I don't know how long I was out. Could have been minutes. Could have been an hour. When I came to, it was dark, really dark. The kind of dark where your flashlight barely carves a tunnel. I climbed out through the passenger door and stumbled up the slope, knees bloodied, ribs aching. When I reached the edge of the road, I expected to see pavement. I didn't. Just trees. More trees. And behind me the hum, growing louder. I ran. Not a smart move, I know. Rule one of any backcountry situation. Don't panic. Don't move unless you know where you're going. But I wasn't thinking with my brain. I was thinking with something older. Something terrified. I don't know how long I ran. The woods never changed. Just trees. No stars. No path. Just fog and bark and breath. And then silence. Total silence. The hum stopped. No wind. No movement. Even my heartbeat felt muffled. That's when I heard the voice. Not loud. Not clear. But familiar. It was my voice, calling from deeper in the woods. Clay. Over and over. Each time more strained. More broken. Like something trying to remember how to speak. I turned and ran the other way. Eventually I saw light. Real light. I burst through the trees onto a gravel trail and collapsed just as a headlamp swept across my face. It was a ranger patrol. 2 of them. They looked down at me like I'd clawed my way out of the ground. They said I'd been missing for 2 days. I told them everything. Every detail. One of the rangers, older guy named Dwayne, didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, "That stretch near Widow's Bend? Should have been closed off years ago. Locals still say he walks it sometimes." "Who?" Dwayne didn't answer. Just walked away, chewing his toothpick. I never got my truck back. Never drove that road again. Didn't even argue when the Park Service reassigned me to trail maintenance in another state. But sometimes late at night, I hear something outside my apartment window. Not footsteps. Not knocking. Just a hum. Deep. Constant. Vibrating. Like the road is still winding. And something's still waiting at the next bend.